The moon is not in Lake Michigan, and yet the consequences of the Supreme Court remain incredibly dire. I don't know if they're going to rule today, but there is, I believe there's belief that it will happen. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene outside of the Supreme Court, kind of praying with the rest of the conservative activists who are stationed out there. I haven't really seen much footage of pro-choice activists clashing with them in any way, but there are gatherings outside of the Supreme Court right now because this is immensely consequential. Just to recap, the Supreme Court does seem poised to overturn over half a century, over 50 years of precedent, and let Mississippi's 15-week abortion limit stand, which significantly cuts into the viability standard that has previously existed. This is not official yet, I should say, as of the time of this broadcast, but based on the responses from the line of questioning yesterday, or based on the line of questioning, I should say, from the Supreme Court justices, I think everyone's fears are founded. Kavanaugh was openly warming to the states' rights arguments presented by the Mississippi Solicitor General Scott Stewart, as well as this should be a legislative issue argument. That's really what a lot of the anti-Roe arguments kind of rest on. This is one of the quotes from Kavanaugh. Why should this court be the arbiter rather than Congress, the state legislatures, state Supreme Courts, the people being able to resolve this? Well, I agree, Kavanaugh. You want to do away with judicial review? Awesome. You guys can just work on the judiciary side of things. You don't need to have any say over policy that is implemented.
Healthcare generally.
Maybe I'll take that trade-off since the Supreme Court was so eager to weigh in on Obamacare. And it would also allow for an eventual passage of Medicare for all to be more cemented, hopefully, if we ever get to that place as a country, because the Supreme Court could not mess with it. That would be a big fear if we ever even get to a Medicare for all system. But I digress. The court was the arbiter in 1973 in Roe v. Wade. And thus, that question is resolved, Brett. You don't necessarily need to love it, but based on your own judicial philosophy or your purported one, you're supposed to uphold precedent. You are not a judicially activist judge, except, of course, they are. Of course they are. But, I mean, people like Kavanaugh, justices like Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, we already kind of knew where their stances was. And this is a 6-3 Supreme Court on the conservative side. But John Roberts, at least on social issues, has tried to trend a bit more with liberals, progressives, sane people in this country. And so he's been a bit of a stopgap in that regard. But even he has been seemingly swayed by the anti-Roe arguments. He said that this was a quote from yesterday. Why would 15 weeks be an inappropriate line? Viability seems to me doesn't have to do with choice, but if it really is an issue about choice, why is 15 weeks not enough time? Because it's not enough time. And again, you are overturning past precedent in favor of this standard that's going to open up the floodgates. But they, of course, understand all this. There is a reason that conservative judicial groups are well-funded and are quite active. And that's because they have enormous power over conservative justices like this. There were rumblings that these anti-choice groups were furious and growing in their anger with Amy Coney Barrett for not taking up the abortion issue sooner. So that's part of what this is. But you also have conservative media, Fox News notably, also threatening and trying to hold these justices accountable, these clerics, basically. Laura Ingraham on Fox News last night was issuing warnings to the entire conservative judicial sphere. Here's part of what she had to say in her long segment, seemingly, on abortion last night.
And if a court with a majority of 6 Republican appointees fails to put Roe to rest, then it should expect a conservative-led movement to shrink the court's power. Oh, and would also mean adios to the Federalist Society. And that's the angle.
Accidentally based. We're going to have a few of these segments. Marjorie Taylor Greene said on Steve Bannon's program that she and the people that support her are the base. We are the Republican Party. Both things true. Both things are true. And, or at least in terms of what Laura Ingraham is saying, I would love to see the Federalist Society go away. And even more than that, I would love to see the Supreme Court be unable to participate in judicial review and have this amount of power. But that's the threatening part of this. Here she is talking to Ted Cruz, expanding on her outrage, even though it seems like she's going to get the decision that she wants, but conservative media has to flex their muscle in order to buttress things like the Federalist Society, honestly, even though she's attacking them here. But she's basically just trying to discipline them. Here she is talking to Ted Cruz about the same issue.
And that decision, more than any decision in modern times, has produced enormous division in our country. Now, I am hopeful, and I think there's some reason to be optimistic, that the result of today's argument will be the court finally admitting that was a mistake, overruling Roe, which is the right thing to do. It's what I've urged the court to do, and returning that decision to the state legislatures.
Well, Senator, if we have 6 Republican appointees on this court, after all the money that's been raised, the Federalist Society, all these big fat cat dinners, I'm sorry, I'm pissed about this. If this court with 6 justices cannot do the right thing here, the constitutional thing, then I think it's time to do what Robert Bork said we should do, which is to circumscribe the jurisdiction of this court. And they want to blow it up, then that's the way to change things finally. Because this can't stand. This is insane.
I would do that in a heartbeat. As you know, the Constitution gives Congress the authority to restrict the jurisdiction of the court. I think we should do that.
Absolutely.
You know, it is something sad looking at this court. And as you guys were going through counting noses, there are only 2 justices that I'm confident how they're going to vote on overruling Roe, and that's Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. Now, I'm hopeful we get to 5. But I am not at all certain, and that's really unfortunate. And you know, you mentioned a minute ago the book I wrote last fall, One Vote Away. There's an
I don't understand how those are the 2 you're most confident in. Pretty confident in Amy Coney Barrett. Pretty confident in Brett Kavanaugh. And now, obviously, I'm pretty confident in Roberts. So they're going to get what they need, I believe. But like the idea that Ted Cruz is seriously, after all the time that Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Republican Party spent basically packing the courts with conservatives and preventing nominees from getting onto the Supreme Court, preventing Merrick Garland, pushing Amy Coney Barrett through with the help of a delirious Dianne Feinstein after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This has been arguably the most successful Republican project outside of deregulation, privatization, and the Trump tax cuts and the Bush tax cuts over the past 20, 30 years. They're not going to limit the court's power when they finally have everybody in line that they want. What Laura Ingraham and Ted Cruz are doing there is essentially issuing a warning, though, or false as it may be, trying to rile up the base in anger against the Supreme Court if they do not rule in the way that they're going to, I believe, and that Ted Cruz and Laura Ingraham want. But this is, I mean, regardless of the politics behind this and all the details I just outlined about how it seems like the Supreme Court justices are swaying, and how the Federalist Society and how groups are responding to this, and how conservative media is responding to this, I shouldn't let that be the dominant story. The dominant story is that a women's constitutional right to choose is on life support right now.
And this is going to be brutal for people. Just broadly, like, this is going to cause a whole bunch of suffering if they get what they want.
You know, you have Susan Collins saying that she's open to codifying the right to an abortion in law. Okay, you got one Republican. Do away with the filibuster. So that's all you need. honestly, because you probably lose Joe Manchin in that vote, and then hopefully you get Sinema on board, and then you can pass it with 50-50. I mean, Democrats haven't gotten rid of the filibuster or haven't altered it for voting rights, which is their own asses on the line. They haven't done it for gun control, which universally the party says they're in favor of, and then you have Chris Murphy making tearful speeches on the Senate floor, but yet not really. I mean, I forget what his position is, but the party as a whole not moving on the filibuster. You have police reform. Party loves to fundraise off Black Lives Matter, but doesn't do anything to eliminate the filibuster in order for actual police reform to happen. If abortion rights doesn't do that, what will? What will? This is going to be brutal, as Matt said. And then you're going to say, oh, the states have a right to choose what their laws are going to be. States are going to make different laws. And do you think that there won't be another Supreme Court case about crossing state lines and disallowing women from going to another state to get an abortion, even if they have the ability to do that? The people this is going to affect most are low-income women and families and non-white women and families who, say you're in Texas. Are you going to have the ability to take off work and drive 12, 15 hours to get an abortion? It's already the case there. I mean, that's not going to happen. So, let alone, of course, implications for extreme cases like rape and incest.